Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Need to Nerd podcast. We've got a Need to Nerd, and we hope that you do too. Today, I'm Spencer, by the way. I should probably say that. And I'm joined by my co-host, West Singletone. See, that's a joke because your Twitter name makes no sense.
Sure. It really doesn't make that much sense, and it ought to be changed, but...
But forever you will be the monotone?
Not even really. I can modulate my voice a little bit.
Well, this week's show is going to be an awesome one, Wes. This week we are going to be talking about a movie that I watched a lot as a child, and
Same.
I have really fond memories of.
Absolutely same.
And watching this movie actually brought up a lot of those memories, and I hope that we get a chance to talk about at least some of them here. We're talking about Digimon the movie. And it was funny, when I tweeted that I was watching this movie for this episode, I got a lot of responses on Twitter. People really love and identify with this film. And I don't know, it surprised me. That might not surprise you. I know that you're like a huge Digimon fan. But I was surprised just how much people love Digimon. If you want to talk about Digimon, we actually now have a public Discord. This is something that I had always planned on doing for this show and for the Heezy Game Media YouTube channel. But yeah, if you want to talk about Digimon, or West, you're actually looking for feedback on tabletop RPGs and the type of things that people want to discuss there. We're going to have free Smash tournaments and free Magic Arena tournaments eventually. Trying to figure out exactly both if we want to get sponsors for that kind of stuff and what the prizes might look like for that. But we are open for business in the public Discord, and there will be a link actually in the show notes if you want to join that Discord. With that being said, Wes, we're going to jump right in this week. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Do you want to say anything about the Discord before we do?
Oh, I can't wait to see you in there. From where we're at right now, we just need more people talking on it, and it's going to be a really healthy, fun place to go talk about any nerd topic. My
favorite piece so far was somebody jumping in, and in your response to them, and I was like, they probably read the rules and just left. Just from their username, because the only rules for this Discord are be kind to one another and lift each other up. I believe that it was funny. One of my rules was going to be no gatekeeping, but I think that rules 1 and 2 covered that. You can't have gatekeeping if you're just being kind to one another. And we just want to talk about the things that we love in nerd culture, and I'm excited for that. With that being said, West, our first segment during our podcast movie reviews is the brief summary / West sells it. With that being said, West, give us a brief summary and sell it for us.
New era, new technology. How does it affect society? Why are children bearing the burden of it? And they make some really great friends along the way. The overarching theme of Digimon is what is the effect of technology on our society, and what is our dependence on it, right? Because when things start to happen in the digital world, right, it always makes electronics in the material plane break down, and that is almost always the source of the conflict.
Yeah, I love it. I love it a lot. So, before you sell it, I'm going to give a brief breakdown. We have 8 years ago, 4 years later, and present day. This breaks the film down into 3 specific parts. You have pre-Digimon Adventures 1. We have... it's funny. We'll talk about 4 years later, because I'm not actually sure where this takes place in the versus the anime.
It takes after the events of Digimon Adventure Season 1, but before
I thought
the events
it did, because they mention the villains of that specific of the end of that show, and so I wasn't sure. Then we have 4 years. Then we have present day, which takes place before like kind of in the middle of season 2. And it breaks down into like a really interesting space where we see how the Digidestin really got picked, what happens with some of the Digidestined between seasons 1 and 2, and then the Digidestin of season 2 go on an adventure. And it's a really fun 3-part thing. To be clear, there is also a short before the film that we have not mentioned. That brief summary, just skip it. It's really bad. I believe
it is an attempt at drama and depiction of like teenagers being mean to each other within the context of trying to get the best view of the Digimon movie.
So to be fair, I never liked Angela Anaconda as a TV show as a child, and as an adult, I literally couldn't stand it.
Things that escaped me. That is a television show.
Did you? So you didn't have cable, so you actually don't know this.
Yes.
Okay. Angela Anaconda was a TV show that aired on the same network as Digimon, which was Fox 13 Kids.
Okay.
Well, or Fox Kids, wherever you were. For Utah, where we are, it was Fox 15. Holy crap. Did I hate that short as an adult. And I didn't like that show as a kid. But that being said, it is part of the film technically, so I thought I'd talk about it. Outside of the Angela Anaconda short, West, why should people watch this film?
Well, I think that there are 2 distinct categories of people that I need to sell it for. The first
being Matt Kling. Tell me why Matt Kling should watch this film.
Exactly. For someone who has never watched Digimon, doesn't necessarily know if they're going to enjoy it, you're just excited because other people are excited. And the second, of course, is going to be if you're a longtime Digimon fan or you need to be compelled to rewatch this show. The overall reason you should watch this show is it tells touching stories of kids and their monsters, and how that interacts with the challenges of growing up, and does it in a very complete way, I think, without really ever taking the time to introduce the characters, understanding that you or thinking that you would already know the characters, but it does such a good job of characterizing them without really introducing them, that I think it comes through.
All right, Wes. So now sell it to 90s kids. Like, these kids have watched Digimon. They jumped on Fox Kids. They know what's up. Like, why are those people supposed to watch this again?
Yeah, this movie is absolutely for you, whether you've already seen it, know all the characters, know every line. You deserve a rewatch of this film. But even if you just watched a few episodes of this television show growing up, you know a few of the characters, you have a sense of who that guy in the goggles are and his dinosaur friend. This movie is also for you because all of these characters are beloved by those who know Digimon because they're given the depth they deserve as children's television show characters. They're allowed to have struggle. They're allowed to learn things. They're allowed to make mistakes. And all of that still occurs and happens in a really beautiful way still in this movie. It's an extension of all of the storytelling that happens in the TV shows.
You know what? Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to say that you hit on a really important part that I think... All right, I did not think we were getting into the Digimon versus Pokemon discussion here, but I actually think this is...
You didn't?
I was hoping not.
Oh, okay. You had intentions.
Because I love them both.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount that... I also love Ash, so what I'm about to say, do not think that I have a problem with Ash, or Misty, or Brock, or May, or any of it. But the amount that the Digidestin are allowed to make mistakes and grow as people, and that growth continues and they actually improve, versus what happens to Ash Ketchum, is substantial.
Yeah, it's definitely not Ash Ketchum's fault that he learns like a year's worth of Pokemon training experience
and then forgets it all.
and then just gets knocked upside the head by something, and arrives in a totally new land and knows nothing again.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's the... So we're gonna go into first impressions, because I actually remember both watching the show for the first time, and as I was watching it again, or this movie for the first time, and as I was watching it again, I remembered all the times I rewatched this movie. I actually remember an experience with my little brother Matthew, who loves this movie, and I probably will send him a link to this podcast. I remember sitting in our toy room, our playroom downstairs, watching it with him again. I think we had this film on VHS, or we rented it a bunch of times from Blockbuster. And I remember playing with the toys that came specifically from this movie.
You definitely bought it then.
What do you mean?
Like, you definitely owned it.
Maybe. Either way, I think that my first impressions of this film were... I was really, really into Season 2 of Digimon. And so the idea of seeing certain... And the reactions have to be spoiler-free. So the reactions of just seeing different things from, some of my favorite Digimon were really big. And, this film brought me personally, like, a lot of joy as a young kid, but also kind of... I mean, Digimon does a really good job of teaching the value of friendship and partnership. And this movie hammers that home in a real way. And I loved this movie as a kid. This movie came out when I was 10 years old. It is not a long film, and it definitely is as good. I don't know how many times I've watched this film, to be honest. Like, I watched it a lot as a child, but watching it as an adult, I would watch it again tomorrow. Like, I think this film is that good.
I'm gonna be honest. Since I finished watching it yesterday, I have just wanted to go watch more Digimon Adventure.
I did too. I totally wanted to watch season 1 of Digimon last night.
I'm actively watching a reboot as it rolls out, and I still want more Digimon.
It's so funny. My wife and I literally were on Hulu last night, and I saw Digimon Adventure come up, the remake, and I was like, "Oh, is this dubbed?" And I clicked it, and it wasn't. And then, but all of the Digimon Adventure, Digimon season 2, I turned to Devin and I was like, "Did you watch this?" That is how good this movie was. It just completely made me want to re-engage with Digimon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks volumes of both my first impressions and now 20 years later impressions. What about you, Wes?
I mean, this... I don't know if I can, cite things from my childhood that made me as excited as the opportunity to watch this movie each time it presented itself. I don't know if I remember exactly the first time I watched this film, but what I know is that I had my parents both worked a lot growing up, and so I spent a lot of time with this awesome babysitter who was one of my preschool teachers. And one of the things we would do every now and again is go, as one did in the late 90s, early 2000s, is go to Blockbuster and rent a few movies and just enjoy. And my babysitter's house had 2 different TVs in it. So at some point I was able to just get my own movie and go watch it, even as they watched my sister and the babysitter watched the movies they rented. And time and time again, choice of so many movies I could watch on the wall as a kid in Blockbuster. But no, I would go and ask the adult, hey, can you help me find Digimon the movie? Again and again. I mean, eventually I probably learned where it was.
Right.
But I freaking this movie meant so much to me as a kid. It means so much to me now. I think that this story is actually just I referred back to the events of this story so many times when trying to ground myself in growing up.
Yeah, I think that all three parts I find teach valuable lessons. And I think that this is a nice transition time. If you haven't watched the film yet, I would recommend pausing the podcast, going and watching the film. I actually think you can watch this film without watching the anime and still get some amount out of it.
In fact, if you are interested in watching the anime, I think that watching this film first doesn't hurt.
Yeah, there is some stuff that you'll not quite understand, like, but it's probably still worth it. But yeah, we're going to go into spoiler season now. So thank you everybody who is listening that hasn't watched. I do recommend, you probably don't actually have to watch the entire first season or the entire second season, but getting some context into the characters might help you. But I think that the movie does a really good job of explaining who X and Y are. They do a good job of explaining Tai and Kari. They do a really good job of explaining Davis. And then they do a really good job of explaining our net new protagonist, which is, oh my gosh, what is his name?
Willis.
Willis. So like the important characters, which are Kari, Tai, Davis, and Willis, I think are all really fleshed out in this film. You'll just I think you'll miss out on Izzy and the season 2 Digidestined if you
definitely. The characters of the season 2 Digidestined are
just
less...
zero
yeah, Cody and Yoli get nothing. TK doesn't even get much.
I think TK gets basically nothing considering how much of the film he's in, but but
I do think that Izzy is a bit like an iceberg. There's a lot of depth to Izzy, but you can get Izzy in 5 minutes of him interacting in any episode, in any airtime he has ever.
I think you could just watch the first Izzy episode of season 1 before watching this film and understand Izzy a little bit better.
That's fair. I think that Izzy
when Tentomon digivolves for the first time in season 1, I think you actually do get a lot of Izzy.
Yeah, that's an interesting episode. We're not reviewing that show right now, though.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. This podcast is going to go on for years, Wes. They're going to hear us talk about Izzy. With that being said, we are in spoiler territory, and I want to start with favorite storyline, and I actually want to go first, Wes.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Because this movie rewatch, I'm just going to go off my rewatch. I'm not going to go off my initial impressions on this because I'd like to go off of like my favorite storyline this time around. And for me, as an adult, I really appreciate the amount that Tai is trying to comfort Sora and how it translates in both Act 1 and Act 2. Like, it is clear that these two are friends. They're best friends. Like, they're legitimately best friends. Tai really cares about Sora. Sora wants Tai to care about her. And Tai is really crappy at expressing himself. And if you've watched the anime, you know that's true. Like, Tai just, like, is, like, fly by the seat of his pants kind of guy. And just doesn't... It's funny, because, like, as a young kid, I was a Tai. It was like, yeah, I'm just going to say what I think, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and that's fine. And as an adult, I realized that you can't do that. And it's funny in watching this film, which takes place after the anime, you're like, oh, Tai realizes he can't do that after the anime. Like, he realizes if he wants to be best friends with Sora, he needs to speak to Sora in a way that is comfortable for her. There's a book called Managing Oneself that I read for work that talks about the type of communication that people relate with. And Sora and Tai clearly have a different communication style, and Tai is starting to recognize that. Like, Tai is starting to realize, like, all right, I need to... And it has nothing to do with Sora. This is actually nothing against Sora. Sora does a really good job through both the anime of, like, going to Tai and, like, expressing to Tai her feelings and emotions and things like that. And that storyline was really engaging for me to see Tai step up. Like, Tai trying to be better. And it was
Tai's written apology to Sora.
Oh, it's beautiful. I actually tweeted that. Did you see my tweet?
I think I missed it, but I'm pretty sure you could model every apology you ever give in your life on that with a bit more grace and acceptance of responsibility, and I think you would write incredible apologies, no matter who you are.
Yeah, I think that, like...
What's a few raindrops between friends?
Oh, I think that's
man.
actually what I tweeted, is like, you know, yeah, I know our relationship has been a little stormy lately. You say you love thunder showers. So what's a few raindrop between friends? And it's like, Ty legitimately cares for this person. And it's funny that all of this is also happening while, like, the internet's under attack, and, like... And it's funny, you watch the interaction between him and Izzy, and Izzy's like, what did you do? And he's like, it's so stupid. But so often, the things that we do that are so stupid are a big deal to somebody else. And
Yep.
you have to accept the fact that you did a dumb thing. And this whole thing is over a hair clip, by the way. Which, like, to me, like Ty, I'm like, it's a hair clip. But, like, at the same time, it was important to Sora. And he recognized that it was important to her. And I don't know why that storyline, resonated with me so hard. But it's like, he recognized, Sora, I know this is important to you, and I'm really sorry.
I think it's really interesting that they used the element of animes almost always using just a standard outfit for their characters, right? Like, their characters just have a costume and that's what they wear when they're on screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting that they used that as a plot point in order to develop the conflict between Ty and Sora.
Yeah. And it was funny. I expected my favorite storyline to be the twins going into this film. Like, the relationship between the two twin Digimon and, like, how that impacted Willis as a Digidestin. But it was... Or I expected it to be, you know, Ty's relationship with Koromon. But neither of those things were true for me. It was very much Ty growing as a person that was my favorite storyline.
Yeah, the Digimon themselves, I think that actually one of the interesting parts of this film is that the Digimon themselves are static, right? Basically, time with the exception of maybe Terriermon. Terriermon does a bunch of things for the first time in this movie, but none of the other Digimon, like, other than I guess maybe hitting Omnimon.
I mean, Vmon too, right?
Vmon doesn't have any new evolutions in that.
Yes, he does.
That's not the first time Golden Arbor Digimon is pulled out.
I'm quite sure it is.
Maybe canonically, in terms of our lifetime, it might be the first place it appears, but in terms of the show, they also do a whole plot in order to become able to Golden Arbor Digivolve.
Keep going. I'm gonna look this up while you're going. Either way.
But generally, right, very often the Digimon themselves are pretty static characters in this film. They have their set personalities, their set flaws and abilities that they have, and mostly they're catalyzed, if anything happens, by the growth in their partners. And while that's true to a large degree in the television show, I think that every Digimon does get their moments of character development in the television show, but I think that most of the focus in this show is on the interpersonal relationships, and
absolutely,
just a bit deeper than they ever got to in the television show, because they're covering, for the most part, these characters during their unstressed time, at least in the setup, right? They're covering the way that these characters are doing when they think everything is okay in the world, which is not usually how it goes, because straight from the start of Digimon Adventure, the characters never get a moment at home where things aren't falling apart.
Right.
Digimon Adventure Season 2 doesn't quite function like that, but the rules are changed substantially.
Sure. So, same question. What is your favorite storyline here, West?
Kari.
Talk to me about that.
Kari,
like from young baby Kari to adult Kari, or teen Kari,
to teenager Kari, is part of it. I also think that Kari is a character that gets shafted by the whole The whole thing, right?
It was funny. I texted you. I think I texted you this, that like, or maybe you texted me this about like how it kind of sucks that Kari gets left out of season 1.
Out of the first half of season
Yeah,
1.
first half of season 1.
Absolutely an absolute robbery, because Kari's a really funny character, really cool character. TK got to go, right? That's also rude. And it's also sad because that whole poor time Gatomon was just living in the pits. But beyond that, I think that Kari is a character that never gets enough screen time really at any point in the overall Digimon story, and never gets enough character building with her Digimon either, with Gatomon. And while Gatomon has like 4 lines total in the whole film, poor thing, Kari herself is present in every arc, makes some pretty... is the narrator of the whole film. I think is also an unmistakable part of it, right? She's the person telling the story. The story is from her point of view. And she takes a very different role as a character in each of those moments. And I mostly think that, considering the constraints the character Kari is under in terms of when this was released and who's really allowed to tell the story and narrate and call out the mistakes of others, I think that Kari really outdoes herself as a character, even if the writing hampered her at all times.
Just an update. The attack on the Emperor's base did happen. It looks like in November of 2000 in the U.S., which would have been after the film aired in the U.S. So this was the first time that I witnessed a golden armor Digivolution. That's
pretty cool. I wonder if how that timing lined up on the Japan end.
Yeah, I can't tell which. So I would assume.
But back then, I'm sure movies got localized far faster than television shows.
Yeah, so August 6th is the original air date, which is before the movie. But I would assume that the marketing for the movie had Veemon's golden armor before that. That's interesting. So, for Americans, this was the first time that they got to see...
Sure, but it's clearly not the first time Angemon and Angewomon are doing this process of summoning the golden armor.
Isn't it the first time that both of them ultimate digivolve, though? Or warp digivolve, I should say.
No, they both have their... I can't say with any certainty.
Sure.
A lot of that is that Gatomon and Patamon are hilariously screwed over as much as their partners are in the storytelling of Digimon, so it doesn't get the same. They don't get to have the same structure as the other characters. They're always a bit limited, but I'm confident that Angemon and Gatomon got there by the end of Digimon Adventure 1.
I legit don't remember. Now I feel bad. That's too funny.
Just because if TK and Kari have both before the Evil Masters section of it, right? If TK or if Patamon and Gatomon have both reached their ultimate form, which is their champion form as well, it's never well defined. Then they actually, or their champions are of the same power level as Ultimate Digimon, or maybe they're naturally Ultimate Digimon. I really couldn't tell you.
These are warp Digivolutions, though. So Gatomon is already a champion level Digimon. So Angelwoman is actually the ultimate form.
Yeah, but like the same level as like War Greymon, right?
Right. That is correct. Yes.
I think they all reach it by the end of Digimon Adventure 1.
I'm not sure. I don't remember. This is something that we might have needed to know before the podcast, but I didn't think we would.
Fortunately, we're not a Digimon expert podcast. We are
a nerd culture podcast
discussing Digimon. So I think that we get
we're okay. We get a free
pass.
Pass.
Slack at every turn.
If you know the answer to this question, please leave it in the comments and let us know. With that being said, Wes, what is your favorite moment of this film?
My favorite moment? Easy. Tai falls through the computer. That moment, basically everything from when, from the moment that like Tai and Izzy get reconnected back on, and War Greymon is just totally done, and Metal Garurumon, but to when they form Omnimon, that whole sequence is just one of like heavy emotion falling on me.
Sure.
And definitely gets me every time.
This part's hard for me. The Omnimon thing as a young child was definitely my favorite part. Like, especially like that spirit bomb moment where all the kids across the world are giving their energy to
slow down the.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, the whole sequence is great. You know, as an adult, I think the moment was like the moment where Terriermon tells Davis what's up. It's like,
yes, I'm your friend, and that means I'll always be here for you.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just like, you don't get to tell me what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be here for you. I mean, I'm not even paraphrasing. Like, this is just how I interpreted it. But like,
definitely,
it was just like, you know, this is gonna happen, and I'm gonna be a part of it. You don't get to stop me from helping you and helping my brother in any way that I can.
Yeah, I do think that that's a really interesting case where Willis has really lost his perspective of the whole thing, because he's viewed himself as this wedge between literally walling for Terriermon this whole time.
Yeah.
When in reality, Terriermon has as many spoons in the whole thing as Willis does.
Yeah, it's really interesting that like the whole, I mean, the arcs 2 and 3 of this film are really connected through Willis, and Willis blames himself for so much. I would say that my second favorite part, an honorable mention, is actually the golden armor Digivolution, and then Gatomon saying, "Isn't that the coolest thing you've ever seen?" I literally looked at Devonair and was like, "Yes, it is."
Oh, absolutely. Oh man.
I remember my
character scaled so well across all of her forms.
Yeah, I remember actually watching this film with my younger brother, and I think that either he or I had multiple of the toys for this film. Like, we had the golden armor Vmon, we had the golden armor Terriermon, we had the little forms of Gatomon's warped Digivolution and Patamon's warped Digivolution. I have fond memories of.
I'm fiercely jealous. I never got. You know how you accurately stated that this is a television show for the purpose of selling kids' toys?
Yeah.
My parents instinctively knew that.
And didn't buy them?
Always kept me as far away as they really could.
From the toy section?
And such.
Sure.
Well, just in general, from like those sorts of marketable television shows. That way, right? Pokemon, I think, slipped in under the radar because the toys that Pokemon sold, or at least the ones I ended up getting of those toys, were always the experiential ones, cards and video games.
Right.
Right. My parents were okay with experiences. Toys were just right out.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. I think that, like, those two favorite moments for me are one of nostalgia and then one of, this is actually just a great moment in the film. Like,
yeah,
I think that so often we want to protect others, and in that protection we lose giving them, agency. And I think that Willis tries to do that. So we're going to do favorite character, and for this film specifically, I want you to give me your favorite Digimon, and then also your favorite character that's not a Digimon. So what is your favorite character, and then what's your favorite Digimon?
So I was just thinking about, Kari, I think, is my absolute standout favorite character of the film, but
Is that true of this series too?
No.
That should be interesting. Is there a difference in your favorite characters of the series? And
yeah. This film is a Kari film.
Yeah.
Kari is the narrator, right?
Yes, absolutely.
things are happening to other characters around it, but ultimately this is about Kari's point of view, and Kari is denied that in Pokemon in Digimon Adventure. So that's where I think that like Kari rises a lot in terms of like how exciting it is for her to be on camera in this film, whereas normally you can't expect it to be as good for her elsewhere. But I wanted to say that I think that I really want to appreciate Sora in this film. Also, a woman whose role is really reduced in this film, right? Her Digimon Beamon never gets action time on screen, really.
Sure.
And in the first and second parts of the film. And
she's just angry, yeah.
Well, in the second part of the film, she's angry. And that is part of the wider relationship between her and Tai, and she makes a whole bunch of like reasonable from her point of view decisions that lead to her not participating in this experience.
Yeah.
But in Act 1, I think the image of Sora out on her balcony watching this devastation unfold, and her first reaction is, "I know you can do it, best friend."
Yeah.
Right?
It's
Come
true.
on, Tai.
Her reaction to being Tai is pretty amazing. Like her reaction to wanting Tai to succeed. I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You know, she's a really good friend, and remember, Sora is thinking this about her friend Tai, who just puked in her hat and didn't tell her about it before she put it on her head.
Yeah.
Also, what a good through line, right? They put that in both of the stories, and it tied them together.
Yeah.
In a really invisible way.
Who was your favorite Digimon in this film?
Oh, hands down, Terriermon.
I knew you were gonna say that. He does. I think he also has the most growth in the film, so it's like pretty easy to pick Terriermon.
Yeah, Terriermon's the only Digimon that gets growth in the film.
Yes, that is fair. Terriermon is loving. So I actually want to talk about who my favorite Digimon in this film, and it's also just my favorite Digimon, which I think people already know, which is Vmon. And I have a specific reason that Vmon is my favorite Digimon, and also why it continues throughout this film. Davis is a nut job in a lot of ways, and Vmon does a really good job of supporting Davis all the time, while also, it's really weird, and people might say I'm crazy for saying this, and that's fine. Vmon is really supportive of Davis, his ideas, him as a person, is really validating for Davis, while also being a really good foil to Davis, which I can't even think of another time in media where this happens, where, like, I think of the first time that he digivolves into Flamedramon, and like his entire personality changes, and it's so calm. In fact, every time Vmon digivolves, regardless of which digivolution it is, he calms down, and it becomes this huge foil to who Davis is as a person.
Yeah.
And this film doesn't change that in any way.
No.
Like, it almost emphasizes that as Vmon grows, he's teaching Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really like that.
Yeah, what I was going to say in response to you talking about the relationship between Vmon and Davis is that, you know, take the four characters, Tai, Agumon, Davis, and Vmon, and start writing down lists of traits that they share, right?
Sure.
You get a really long list, right? They're really all variations on the same archetype.
It's funny, I don't actually think that Agumon and Vmon are that similar.
I agree that they're the most polar of the things, right? No, definitely. It probably goes like in an idea that it's somehow like a spectrum along one line, which it's definitely not. They're multi-dimensional ideas, right? It goes from like Agumon, Davis, Tai, Vmon.
Sure.
Along some sort of line. I really don't know what it is that they're all placed along, but
Yeah.
Vmon is the best of the four of them of distilling the ideals of the Crest of Courage
Yes,
and
absolutely.
mentoring others with them.
I actually think that Agumon in a lot of ways has a hard time with Tai's crest, whereas Vmon like straight up is just that. Like if Vmon was to be sorted into a Hogwarts house, he'd just be Gryffindor. Like the hat wouldn't even need to touch his head, and like that. I mean that Digimon would be.
Well, Agumon has a duality.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is really interesting.
But the thing is that when you see Vmon digivolve into Flameformon, you actually see that. Like, it becomes like a, here's what courage is about, rather than just the idea of being courageous, which I think is really interesting. It's funny that you mentioned this line, right? Because my favorite character in this film is easily Tai.
Mm-hmm.
Because he, as a character... He actually, this might be rude, but I think he might be the only character in the whole film that shows growth. I think that Davis does in some ways in his conversation with Willis, but like Willis's growth happens literally like 2 minutes before the end of the film. And so like I don't really count that. And Kari has already evolved through the show, and TK has already evolved through the show. And so you don't get to see that. Mm-hmm. Whereas Tai, like, you actually see the in-between seasons 1 and 2. And I think you actually see, if you watch season 1 and season 2, you actually see a different Tai giving advice to Davis. And you're like, so, where does this Tai come from? Like, where...
I myself have a theory that Tai exited Digimon Adventure season 1 with a substantial amount of PTSD.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that... and
Matt probably did too, for what it's worth.
But definitely, both of them. They were at the core of the conflict, absolutely. But Tai's core conflict is one of wanting to save people, but the only route he can save people is through violence.
Yes. I think that Matt... So, it's funny. I actually wish they had given Matt more in the second arc. Mm-hmm. It really bugs me that, like, Matt... and TK and his grandma are the butt of a bunch of jokes.
Yes.
It's like, well, we'll get into this in things that I would change, but like, it's funny that in this film, Tai is my favorite character, whereas in the show, Matt was my favorite character.
Yeah.
Because Matt just didn't seem, I mean, also, it is the reason that I think Matt feels the way he feels is the way he's treated in this film, for what it's worth. But Tai does so much growth in this film in both. I mean, you see this, I think, in episode 3 of the first season, or it might be episode 2, either one, where like you start to see Tai like admitting that he might be too shoot by the hip, too happy-go-lucky type of stuff, and that kind of continues throughout the show. And in this, you just realize that all Tai really wants to do is help people. Like, and you text me, it was really funny, you text me this moment where where Agumon digivolves to Greymon. He says, you can be whoever you want, big guy. And
yeah,
like,
sure, you can do yourself whatever you want.
Yeah, and like, Tai really cares about Kari, Kai really cares about Agumon. Kai just cares. Mm-hmm. Tai just cares, and I said Kai, I meant Tai. And it really comes across in this film. And it really speaks to who Tai becomes in Digimon Adventures 2. And I'm going to be watching Digimon Tri here in a little bit, and I hope that continues.
You're in for a treat then, Spencer.
Oh, good.
Tai learns a restraint on him, I think, in the course of like from Skull Greymon forward, right?
Oh man, that is a good episode. But that like, episode shows like actual sadness in Tai.
Well, so yeah, I think that Tai and Agumon have this core tension between all of what they do, which is that
the Agumon is reserved and Tai is not.
Well, and also that Agumon is I think that Tai never lets himself forget that Agumon is a devastating weapon.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he gets the T-Rex, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
It's funny.
all of the other things that the other Digimon turn into that they're like in their champion form, right? Have a compromise in their like what that thing is as not the most devastating thing.
Yeah.
Except Kabuterimon. Kabuterimon is scary as all heck. Love him, but he's scary looking. But you know, big bird, wolf, giant cactus, walrus.
But
right?
that's champion, right?
Yeah, those are all in their champion forms.
Oh, sorry, you're talking about champions. Okay.
Right, and ultimately, like T-Rex is the most devastating thing of all of them, and he only becomes more weaponized, more mechanized from there. And that's Ty's best friend, and Ty's friendship with his best friend is how he saves. Where it happens in the real world, it leaves a catastrophe behind it.
And it's funny that you watch this film and you see Tai see a Greymon lay waste to a city to protect Tai. And then, you don't know this in the show, but you watch Tai. Imagine being Tai and seeing this Agumon digivolve into Greymon and you're like, I know what is about to happen. And then seeing it, into Skull Greymon is probably just as hard. But I think the reason that Tai resonated so much with me is his character growth, his show of love. You mentioned that in your favorite moments, right? Like, but I don't think that show of love was just for War Greymon. I think that show of love was for protecting the world and protecting.
Yes. Oh no! Yeah, Agumon. I don't think Tai has a primary concern for Agumon. He does. But
no, he's his best friend. He obviously does.
Always tangential to Agumon, we can't give up.
Yeah.
We together are the proven most powerful part of our unit because of main character power.
Sure.
But if we lose, everyone loses. Yeah. Right? Is this ongoing theme. And right, when they tell the story of finding their crests the first time, right? Skull Greymon flips out on everyone, then everyone else gets their crests first, then Tai finally gets to Metal Greymon.
Yeah. Let's talk really quickly about kind of, the things that we would change. I typically like really positive messages across the shows that I am a part of, but there is some stuff I would change in this show. Yeah. The way that Matt is treated in this show. So first of all, I'll be honest. I hate TK as a character. I find him annoying, whiny. I would change TK's arc through Digimon 1 and Digimon 2. I think that TK deserved more than everything he got. But Matt's another one where, like, Matt's feelings throughout all of Digimon are completely valid. Like, He does so much, gets basically no credit, and then he becomes the butt of the joke in the movie.
Yeah, Matt is the member of the core is the only guy of the core Digidestined who does his own emotional weightlifting.
Yeah, and
sometimes
it's so funny. Spoilers for the Digimon show, but like when Matt gets turned evil, quote unquote, it's like I freaking agreed with Matt. I'm like, you know what, Matt was right. Like, y'all don't care about the amount of weight that he's lifted.
Yeah, if Sasuke got half the humanization along his path that Matt does, Naruto would be a better show.
I can't stand Naruto, so we'll just move on. But Matt is absolutely right, and this movie doesn't do anything to change that. Like, and it's so frustrating too, because the entire. So first of all, that pairing is great. It's this very reserved person with this very logical Digimon that like just want to problem solve, and because they're not this outgoing emotional pairing, they're somehow relegated to something. It's such a truth of the world, and for some reason it
has leadership because he wanted it.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know why it bugged me in the movie more than it did in the show, but it actually did. It was like I have no idea why it bugged me, but I wish that they would have given, especially considering that Omnimon was like such a big point in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did it just have to be Tai? Like, why was Tai the focal point of this?
I agree 100%. It doesn't really make. I think that actually, two things. First, I guarantee you, Matt got screwed over in the American edit, because I did a little bit of research, Spencer, during a break a moment ago, which is that the three films that make up, right, they really do feel like their own different films. They each have their own animation style. They were each released in different times in Japan.
Oh.
Yeah, so the first one, the short film, was titled Digimon Adventure and released March 6, 1999 at the Toei Animation Spring 1999 Animation Film, or Animation Fair.
Yeah.
The second short, which is Digimon Adventure Children's War Game, so the war game overture comes through clearly in that. Following year, in 2000 at the Toei Animation Spring Animation Fair.
Sure.
And Digimon Adventure 2 Part, and then so the cut that becomes the third act was called Digimon Adventure 02 Part 1, Digimon Hurricane Landing / Part
that's
2,
why the Part
Evolution,
2 of the... Have you seen Part 2 of this movie, by the way?
Huh?
Have you seen the second part of this film?
No.
Oh my gosh. We will have to do a review of the movie.
Of the Japanese version of this film? Yeah.
No, there's an I think there's an... Actually, I might be able to say this on air. We'll talk about this later.
Okay.
Either way, that makes a lot of sense. But you're saying Matt got robbed because you think that there was an edit.
So 120 minutes of total film, 85 of which made it to the American release.
Oh, that makes so much more
25
sense.
minutes got caught, and all of them was probably character development for the good characters.
That makes
and
sense.
Tai, right? But like Tai is a good character, but he gets it all.
It's so funny because like Mimi's part in this film too was the other thing that I would change. I'm like, why even include this moment of Mimi?
Mm-hmm.
Like, other than being a joke that she's in Hawaii, but it's like, why can't you just disconnect the phone? Why make Mimi look like a spoiled brat even more, when already by the end of season 1 you've changed that narrative of Mimi, but now in the movie you're revisiting it, and it really bugged me. Anyway, what about you? Also, Act 3 in my opinion was really, really good. The only thing that I would change is that the two newest Digidestin, what are their names?
Terriermon and Willis?
No,
Yoli and Cody.
Yoli and Cody got shafted. That was the only other thing that I didn't like.
I'm sure they just got lots of good lines cut.
Yeah. What about you? What would you change?
I think I would take the same lens to this, to changing this film, that I do to any film from its era, which is that there are clearly... we've hit this point in designing these shows where there are really compelling female characters, really compelling women in the show, and then they never get the time they actually deserve, but they're there.
Right.
So I would expand Kari's role.
You sounded like you wanted to expand Gatomon's role too.
Yeah, I mean, just that, like, for the convenience of... They could only tell so many stories in what's already an overfull film, right? 85 minutes, and it's just oodles of things happening all the time, right? We really have...
Yeah, I think we would both make this... I think we would both make this film 20 minutes longer.
Yeah, well, I think that, like, the truth is I probably just wanted to have this film be released as the 3 original films cut together to make sense.
Right.
But nothing substantial, nothing substantive gets cut.
Yeah, I agree with that. That being said, because I think we've both made it clear, unless you have something else to add on what you would change.
I think other things I would change are... it's so sad that the team never gets together. Right?
It's only because that's the first movie, right? I was thinking this too, where it was like, I wonder if they had done the first movie earlier sometime, like at the end of season 1, and they just did a film where, like, the version 1 Digidestin got together, and then they did a second film where the version 2 got together. But it's hard to say because this film is so good that I feel that way. Like, I don't want to change history and make a V1 film and then a V2 film, because I think this film does a good job of specifically of Willis being the bridge between the V1 and the V2 Digidestined, and I like that.
I'm confident that Willis isn't a character in the Japanese cut of Digimon Wargame.
Well,
because he doesn't actually exist as a character. He only exists in Izzy talking about this kid he's talking to on the internet.
Right.
Who at the time is 5, right? It makes no sense that, I mean, they sell, right? Because they have to make that bridge, they force Willis to be something much more than he is.
Sure.
In terms of like a kid who's taking classes at Colorado State or something,
sure.
as Izzy says in the
5-year-olds do that, man. I don't know what to tell you. That being said, what will you remember the most from this film? You watched it again. You said you wanted to watch the show. Like, what
the biggest takeaway?
I mean, like, I think that what we have written down is, what will you remember the most from this film?
The soundtrack. I haven't.
Yeah, me too, dude. We didn't get to talk about it, but this soundtrack is complete fire.
It has so many incredible, like the fact that Smash Mouth caps off the whole thing, with All Star, as just the most understated thing, because this came out before Shrek. I want to say.
I mean, Bare Naked Ladies 1 Week also is in this.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
I still listen to the Mighty Mighty Boston's, the impressions that I get on a regular basis. Kids in America is
so good. It's funny. When
I actually have it saved to my Spotify.
When Hey Digimon comes on in this, I don't know if you watched.
Hey.
Yeah, don't worry, it'll be playing at the end of this episode. I will edit it in. But when that comes on during the film, it is just kind of like a.
Mm-hmm.
It was like punch in the gut of nostalgia for me. It was like, I remember them getting on the train and this song playing during the anime, and like, holy crap. The soundtrack of this film, I mean, we talked about that during a lot of the Disney movies. The soundtrack of this film is just knocked out of the freaking park.
It really only has like one note. It's these like ska-y, like it's somehow takes like the intersection of like pop punk, ska, and metal, pulls it all together and holds it together for just long enough to release only this soundtrack.
Yeah, I love it. I love it a ton. I think the other thing that I will remember from this film is that even when things get hard, it is important to remember that you have connections and that people care.
Yeah.
And like, it does it in all 3 acts. You have Tai and Kari caring about Agumon and Greymon and Koromon, and then you have the care of Tai to Sora, and honestly, you have Izzy caring about Tai and his relationship, and you have like they're through these intense moments. You have these moments of, hey, I care about you. Like, what is going on? You see that with Davis and Willis. You see that with Willis and Terriermon. You see that with Kari, and like you see it throughout the whole film of just people actually caring. And for a freaking kids movie, like, there's a lot of heart and caring in this film.
Yes.
People actually care about each other.
I've been beginning to realize that part of the reason why anime excites me more than a lot of television, and which animes I really enjoy in the end, it's just the passion of the characters.
Yeah.
Like the degree to which they love and live, even as they're struggling, is always, I think, the thing that makes or breaks the anime.
Yeah. I think that'll wrap up my final impressions as well. Is there anything else you want to say on the film before we move on to rating it?
Watch it. watch the Crunchyroll reboot of Digimon Adventure. It's a good time to be a Digimon.
It's on Hulu now too. I might watch it subbed. I'm not gonna lie. Like, that's how much I want to watch it.
I think you should, because if you catch up, then you can just watch it as it's being released, and it's only 20 minutes of watching sub every week.
Sure. That being said, Wes, we give A to F for reviews on this show. Or were we doing letter grades or number grades? I don't remember.
I was confident we were doing a 5 scale.
We were. All right. Give me your number scale. Where do you rate this? Do you want me to go first? We'll make it easier for you.
Why, you think you got it?
Oh, I think it's a 4-5. I think that a 5 has to be perfect, and you wouldn't change anything. And I actually think that Matt got robbed in this movie. But other than that, I don't really hate the Cody Yoli arc. The fact that they don't really have an arc that much, because I think the film is actually about Willis, Ty, and Kari. But I think that Matt did get robbed, because it could have been, that second arc could have been about Matt and Ty, and it could have really made a important change to Matt's feelings during the anime.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I think this film was almost perfect. And I loved watching it. And also, this is a kids movie, and the fact that I laughed so much, I smiled so much, I cried, they knocked it out of the park here.
I'm actually going to go substantially lower than you in my rating, because I can levy several criticisms at the film, and also because I suppose right now I won't kid myself with where this movie stands overall.
Sure. You're going to give it a 3?
3.5. The most beloved 3.5. And mostly my criticisms of this film lie squarely in the hands of whoever wrote the English adaptation for Fox. Because I think
you hated that short so much. No, I'm just kidding.
No, not the short. I think that your complaint about Matt being the butt of a joke was one of.
I mean, it's annoying.
Well, no. Just imagine to yourself, right? Those scenes, given the treatment and cultural context in Japanese of being out in the countryside with your aging grandmother. That's a real Japanese experience.
Sure. I agree. I think that there's...
It's ruined because in an attempt to localize and market this to a very specific audience, they overwrote a lot of really good moments of touching kind of time with jokes because they're easier to write.
Sure. That's fair. I don't blame you for that. I do think that I would not go below a 4 for this film.
Mm-hmm.
Only because I think it's a legitimately great film that teaches the importance of caring for one another outside of your inner circle too. There's a lot of caring that happens for people that are just met or people you don't even know.
Yeah.
And it's legitimate. And go ahead.
I think a good example of that caring for people that you just met is, I think that the relatable experience of, oh, you have a Digimon, you've been through some of the same thing as me, right? Willis can instantly be understood in so many ways by all of the Digidestin he interacts with in that film, because they have spent so much more time on the road together processing what it means to be a Digimon's partner.
Right.
And they know exactly what he's experiencing. They might not know where along that path he is, but they know they've been through it themselves.
Leave a comment. Let us know your rating and what you would think of this, what you thought of this movie. It's definitely a knockout of the park for me. It's funny to hear you go lower than me. I thought that you would give this almost a 5. I thought you were going to be this being one of your favorite films. I thought you were going to knock it out of the park. But you can find me at Sons13H. You can find West at East_monotone. You can see that on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. You can find it in the show notes if you are listening. Join the Discord. It is a public Discord. There will be channels for the Patreon once we launch that and stuff like that. But check that out. Get in contact with other people with similar interests as you. Like this video, like this podcast, sub and share. It means the world. And if you leave a review, we will soon have a segment where we read reviews on the show at the end of every episode. So leave a review. Tell us what you think, how we could improve, what you love, things like that. Thank you everybody so much for listening. West has to go play some D&D, and we'll talk to everybody later with another episode of the Need to Nerd podcast.
Bye, everyone.